wasn't it good to be in Sunday school this morning?
Yep.
I think it was. It's so good to be back in Sunday school. I know things have been, she said, you like it laying over like this? I said, absolutely not. She's like, I'll take care of you. You know, we got to talking about how things have been and how different it is. And, you know, I know that the world is still on the cusp of so much confusion and trouble, but we know who's constant. And we're glad that you're here to worship Him with us this morning. If you got your Bible, we're going to be in Genesis 2, and we're going to jump a lot. I got a couple things to say before we get deep into the message, but this is where I want to start. Everyone's tuned in, or will be tuned, and glad you took the time to watch us, and again, we welcome you to Simon. If you don't know, me and Jordan are engaged. You know, it's a wonderfully crazy time in our lives, and just happy to be a small part of it, I guess you could say, man. But it seems like every day brings something new, so we appreciate your prayers in this. But of course, as a preacher, everything that I go through in life is a message. And some things I don't want to preach about, but the Lord just gives me messages about them. And so this morning I'm going to preach about a reflective covenant. We're going to preach about marriage and divorce for a little while. And if you will, when this is over, I ask that you just stick around briefly. For those of you that are here Wednesday night, you know I made an announcement. We're going to make it again tonight, or this morning after the service. So if you would, please don't leave immediately. It won't take very long at all. We'll do that as soon as the service is over this morning. But this morning we're preaching about a reflective covenant. That's what a marriage is. A marriage is a covenant between two people. When you stand before God, when you stand before that man who marries you, you're making a covenant that you and your wife, or you and your husband, are going to take these vows seriously, that you're going to love, honor, obey. You know these things. And I've been able to witness many people take their vows, and I've also married a couple as well. Jordan's had the privilege to marry some people as well. And so we've seen this before. If you don't know, Jordan is ordained as well. And in saying all this, there's something that I see. A lot of people, they're looking at the honeymoon. They're looking at the government, you know, what it means. Now we're going to be together, blah, blah, blah. And the ceremony itself isn't as big a deal. Now, of course, you got friends, family there, however you chose to do it. You know, that's a big deal. These things are a big deal. But I'm always drawn to that moment where these two people listen to what the pastor says, and they repeat after them. And you have to understand there's so much power in that moment right there. I would say more power than what the government legally does when they sign them documents. And for anybody that knows that you file taxes, you do all this stuff, that's a big deal. That's your income. Now we're joined together. This takes a lot of stuff. I remember when Elizabeth got her name changed. It was like 7 of us that went down there in the middle of the ghetto, you know, trying to make sure she was okay so she could get her name changed. And, you know, all that stuff to say, that moment right there where two people are joined together before God, it is such an amazing thing and such a big deal because you make a covenant with God. And so we're going to look at this, and there's a couple things that I want to say before we get into it. Always, you know, there's things you shy away from as a preacher you don't want to preach about. Offering, that's one of them. And it's amazing because, you know, when it comes to the kingdom of God, you know, in order to receive, you give. Now, we don't, you know, give to receive, but there's a mystery of the gospel in that you do the opposite. If you want to live, you die. If you're going to receive, you give. And so, but a lot of people don't like to hear that. And so as preachers, we tend to shy away from the offering messages. And of course, marriage and divorce is something we don't really want to preach about. And the reason is because so many of our congregants have gone through divorce, they're faced divorce. And we're so worried and scared to say something that's wrong. So we tend to shy away. But I believe that there's so much truth about marriage. And there's so much, not because I'm about to go through it, that's not what I'm getting at. But the Bible speaks so much about it. We're going to look at this morning that it does us wrong to not preach about it. And so I want to say as we go through this, please understand this isn't directed to anybody. This is just my life that God's given me. And of course, you know, I'm not the smartest man. I only preach what God gives me. But just know that there is in no way anything meant to offend or hurt. So we're going to pray before we jump into this, if you will. Father, we love you. We thank you for the opportunity to stand before you today. And Jesus, I pray that I would say nothing just to sound smart, that I would not speak above myself, Lord, to sound intelligent. I pray, God, that you would help me. I pray for the anointing. Lord, that you would anoint every word that's spoken, that the truth would come forward. That, God, you would anoint our hearts and our ears, that you would soften them to be able to receive your word. And God, I pray that you would just deal with every heart and every mind that's here in the mighty name of Jesus. So, in saying all this, I do got to tell you, had a lot of fun being engaged so far, and I'll tell you why, because she's not out here, and I'm going to talk about her, just briefly. As everybody knows, I'm a mama's boy, just always have been. We were in the world, we butted heads. I mean, I couldn't stand her. Then when I got saved, I realized something, we were just so much alike, and, I'm the first male, and so this is a tough time for her, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. And now she acts like it's not. She walks around real tough, but it's a rough time for her. And so I've been trying to be as compassionate and merciful as I can. So what I did the other day, I was going to get something to eat, and there's a lot of things happening. We've signed a lease and it coming up, so a lot of things. This is what I told her. This is me being very compassionate and merciful. I walked out and said, "Hey, Mom, I read something in the Bible the other day. I just wanted to tell you about it. I don't know if you've ever read it before." And she said, what are you talking about? And we'll do this from time to time. Read something and I'll be like, "Did you know this was in there?" And so I said, "You wouldn't believe that it's in there." And she said, "What is it? What did you read?" And so I quoted this verse to her. And it says there in Genesis 2:24, it says, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh."
Wrong.
And she just looked at me. And I said, "Did you know that was in there?" That was the response I got. She didn't laugh at all. She just said, "Yeah." "Oh, okay. I didn't know if you knew. I thought, we were both learning something together." And I laughed about it because, man, it was funny to me and to Dad, but not to her at all. But in saying that, a lot of times we say these verses that we know, but there's so much context with them. Now, if you've been here for Wednesday night or if you've watched live, we've been studying about the life of David. And one thing I love about the studies we're doing is we're finding context. Where did these stories, or how did it happen? What was going on in David's life at this moment when this happened? And so there's so much deep context when we read in this. And so I just want to tear it apart and look through it some more. So as it said, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." The Bible also says in 25, "And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed." Didn't have to include that one, but I chose to. Now, the Bible goes on in Matthew 19. If you turn there, we're going to be at 1. I've actually got my study Bible here with me. I've never preached out of it before, but it had so much notes that I didn't want to just write them down. I wanted to give them to you as we read them. So I'm getting a little different today, but there is a lot that I want to say in this short time about marriage. Now, the Bible, as we said in Genesis 2:24, that a man shall leave his father, his mother, shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Obviously, we know this doesn't mean just abandon your mother. That's not what it's saying, and she would remind me of that if she was sitting out here today. But there is something that happens when two people become one under God. And now, Jesus would speak about it. The Bible says in Matthew 19, and in 1, it says that it came to pass that when Jesus had finished these sayings, he departed from Galilee and came into the coast of Judea beyond Jordan. And great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. The Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him, and saying unto him, "Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause?" Now, of course, they're speaking about divorce, but I want you to hear what they said. Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Now, what you got to keep in mind is that the Pharisees knew what they were saying, they knew what the law was, and they were looking, just as a lot of people in the church would hate to talk about it, they were looking to argue. And that's not at all what I'm trying to do today, and that's not what Jesus was going to do. So the Bible says in 4, it says, "And he answered and said unto him, Have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And he said, For this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall twain be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder." And they said unto him, "Why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and to put her away?" Now, this is why context is so important as we're reading this, because I've heard people preach against divorce and deeply and harmfully using just this portion. And now the Bible goes on, and there's more to this particular scripture. It says, "And he said unto them, Moses, because the hardness of your hearts suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so." And
And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, commits adultery. And whosoever marry her, which is put away, doth commit adultery. Now, I want to read you just a little bit of what some of my study material says here. It says, God's will for marriage is one mate, a man with a woman. One marriage for life. And it goes on, it says, Jesus does, however, make an exception. Marital unfaithfulness. That's what he said, except it be for fornication. Don't know fornication is sexual relations between two people that are unmarried. Except it be for fornication. Except it be the adultery, what we're speaking about. It says, marital unfaithfulness, or in the Greek, porneia, is how it's said, includes adultery, which is, like we said, sexual relations. They go on and they say, in context, what that can mean is also abuse. And there was a little bit more that porneia would describe, but specifically, of course, it does involve intercourse and sexual relations. But it goes on, and it says, according to this verse, divorce is permitted only when sexual immorality is involved. And of course, we're going to get into just a few others. If you're looking, and you don't have to turn there, but you can write it down. 1 Corinthians 7, and it is 15. Paul gives another reason, and we're going to talk about that briefly. New Testament, but another reason. But he says, and this is the abandonment by the unbelieving spouse. And they also said flagrant abuse could be considered with the porneia. Now, don't get lost in what I'm saying here, and understand everyone's situation is unique. Everybody does things differently, and everybody's been in different places. So, of course, you might have been in an abusive relationship. You might have been joined together with somebody you shouldn't have been joined together with. I have run into so many people in the church that have been married or divorced for so many different reasons that just to simply give you this complete black and white is just going to hurt somebody. So stay with me as we go through this. He says it's the whole purpose of what Jesus was saying here concerning divorce. He was talking about marital unfaithfulness. It says biblical facts concerning divorce. When Jesus criticizes divorce, he's not criticizing a separation because of adultery. He's being critical of the kind of divorce permitted in the Old Testament. You remember, the Pharisees said, for every cause. Is it okay, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Now, what Jesus said was, no, it is not. He said, except for fornication. Now, understand it goes on, and in the Old Testament, you can see in Deuteronomy 24 and 1 through 4, where they talk about it some. There were Old Testament cases where a man would put away his wife because she became displeasing to him, because he finds something indecent about her. Some of these things might have been premarital involvement before marriage. And it says God's desire in such cases was that the two remain together. What I'm getting at is this. What the Old Testament did is a lot of things happened. They made these laws and they made these exceptions. And so what Jesus said was, it was always supposed to be from the beginning that a man would be joined to a woman and they would become one. And obviously one person cannot be split in half and separated. They'll die. You cannot cut me in half and both sides of me live. It won't happen. So what marriage was always intended from the beginning was that two would become one, unable to be separated. But, of course, as we said, the law came in, the priests began to speak, the Pharisees came in, all these different things happened. And so it got twisted, it got turned. And so suddenly the Old Testament is, well, if your wife did things before marriage that you don't like and you find that's something that is displeasing. If she was involved in things, and that's not how it was supposed to be. You see, when it comes to dating and when it comes to marriage, and some of this is going to be hindsight for you, but as a Christian, before you ever join in marriage with somebody, you better do some research. I want to tell you why, because the Bible says the heart is wicked above all things. And so what that means is this. And I want to tell you, you can love somebody so deeply before you even know much about them at all. And I know from speaking as a man, and I know from speaking as a woman, because a man can just see somebody and be convinced, that's the one right there. I just know it. Something in my gut tells me, the Lord's speaking to me, that is the one. And for a woman, it can, and I've heard the excuses, I've heard, man, there's just something about him. Talk to women that have been through abuse, been beat, been all these things. And there's just something about him, I just can't explain it. It just does something. The heart is deceitfully wicked above all things. And so as a dating,
even engaged before you begin to be married. It is your job as a Christian to discern, to do the work, the uncomfortable work. When me and Jordan first got together, and I'm going to put her on blast for a while, I remember we were in a car, and we worked together, if you don't know, and one of our coworkers was like, y'all two ought to be together. And I said, can't we just be friends? And they were like, well, why not? And I remember Jordan's response. You just gotta know she's very serious. She doesn't joke around much at all. She was like, if y'all will slow this car down, I'll jump out right now, and we can just be done with this. But I was like, as a preacher in church, and this is just too much to try to get into. I just don't want to, blah, blah. And so when we first began to talk, I told her very clearly, this is how we began, just talking, I just want to be a friend. And now, the reason that I did this, and you're going to think that I'm very prideful, but I'm just trying to be honest with you. I really, help me, Lord. Y'all know my brother Tim said, sometimes you just go to say things you just shouldn't say. I didn't want to be dumb. Elizabeth would tell me, and I remember when we were growing up, to get on her too, Dad used to tell her, he'd say, Elizabeth, it's okay if people buy stuff for you. You ain't got to be with them. It's okay if they take you out to eat. You ain't got to be the girlfriend. All that kind of stuff. Well, I realized something as a guy. It's a whole lot harder to be on the other side of that. You just can't be, in relationships, or just can't be, I took a girl out to eat one time because she come to church with me, and she told everybody we went on a date. And I was like, we didn't do any of that. We just had food. We always eat after church. That's what we Pentecostals do. I thought it was a polite thing to do. And then, the rest of my people were like, we heard y'all dated for a long time. We went out one time to Olympic. I didn't know that was a serious, I didn't know, So I realized it, that you have to be careful. So I was very upfront with Jordan. That from the beginning, I'm not interested. We're just going to be friends. And quickly, feelings came in. And now I've been there before. And I said, oh, this ain't good. And so this is what I did. I tried as hard as I could. You won't believe, but I tried as hard as I could to give her a reason to leave. So we go out to eat, and this is how we start the conversation. We go out to eat, and I'd be like, what do you think about tithing? You almost not like tithing that much. I said, what do you think about tithing? What do you give? And we would just talk like that. Once I got through one issue, I'd be like, okay. Maybe another week we'd go out, and I'd be like, what do you think about drinking? What's your thoughts on that? I'm talking, we got into some terrible stuff, man. Like, really, look, you want to talk about dating? I took her out to some good places and was like, all right, you tell me how you feel about this. It was rough, man. But I found something out. We agreed on a lot of things. And so we began to, talk a little bit more. But I was very careful, and I'll tell you why. Because as soon as I got saved, some wise people were like, you better be careful. There will be people that come and they want to steer you away. Now you see, your relationship with God is the most important thing that ever happened in your life. And marriage, and I believe this, is the second most important thing. Understand why? Because when you get saved, you become a new creation. When you get married, two people become one creation. Ain't nothing else like that in this life. So here what I'm getting at here. Your partner can pull you away like nothing else in this world.
Amen.
I know people that used to go to church and they got married and don't come to church at all. I know people that were lost before they got married and then they did better. Now hear what I'm telling you. Your partner can be either the biggest advantage, the biggest help, or the worst thing in your life. And I know this. That's why the Bible, it talks about not dating unbelievers. This is why we would talk to our sister all the time, because they will pull you away. And don't ever get it twisted. If you're not dating, you do not date for evangelism. Do not ever try to get with somebody to lead them to Jesus. All it'll do is hurt you and pull you away. And now I know there are some cases where there were some strong women and possibly even some strong men that got in relationships with people that were lost and they're saved now. That's fantastic, but I would never recommend you to do that ever, because it's not a smart bet. Now that's not being ugly to people that have lived through that. If you have, thank God that the grace of God kept you, and not only kept you, but drew your husband or your wife in. But get what I'm telling you. It is your job to do the research, to be cautious. Why? Because the whole time we were talking, this is what my heart was saying. You can marry her. We sitting there eating, and I'm trying to tell her, I just don't think I was really trying to date. My heart was like, she looks like the one you need to spend the rest of your life with. And then I remember the first time we took her to her Bible, I said, it'll be casual. And they stood up there and said, this is Daniel's soon-to-be wife. And I thought, my God, man, if it ain't my heart, it's the people I love, you know, I mean, just can't get away from it. But, hear what I'm getting at. Your heart doesn't want to be alone. Your heart wants to feel loved. Your heart is flesh. It needs to be comforted. And it will make excuses. And it will lie. It will do these things. So it is your job to do the work before you ever get into a marriage. So you might say hindsight to that is 2020. And this is why we get into what Paul gave. That 1 Corinthians verse, Paul will speak about marriage. And this is what he said. If a spouse gets married, and the other spouse, if the husband gets married and the wife is not married, this is what Paul said. If the woman, the unbelieving spouse, wants to leave, then it is okay. If Uncle Jeff got saved, him and Betty were lost in the world, and Uncle Jeff got saved, and Betty said, I don't want nothing to do with this faith, and she divorced him, it would be okay. It's permissible for him to be married. It is not adultery. But this is what Paul also said. If Uncle Jeff gets saved and Betty's lost, and Betty says, I just can't stand you going to church, but I still want to be with you, then he's not to divorce. So you can read it for yourself, but it's if the unbeliever wants to depart, let them depart. But if they don't want to, let them stay. And so this is where we get into a couple exceptions. But Jesus, as he spoke, said that except for the cause of fornication, and I want to tell you why. This is the most important thing that I'm preaching to you about. Marriage is a covenant reflection of Jesus' relationship with the church. Now, hear what I'm getting at here, because this is bigger than you and this is bigger than me. Marriages do fail, but Jesus' marriage to the church will never fail. Now, people divorce and people leave, but Jesus doesn't leave the church. And we're going to get into that even more in detail, but get this. The whole purpose of marriage and a person being joined together before God is because it represents something that happened biblically and spiritually. That God would come down to this world. He would leave the God of heaven. That Jesus would come down and be born of a woman. And then what would happen to that? He would die on the cross and be crucified for our sins. And he would rise from the dead to one day be reunited with the church, the body. Every believer makes up the church, the bride. And Jesus is coming back for the bride, the church. So here's what I'm getting at this morning. Your marriage, my future marriage, every marriage is reflective of the covenant relationship between Jesus Christ and his bride, the church. So this is why Jesus said, except for unfaithfulness. Because this is what happened. People in the Old Testament would leave God, and they would make idols, and they would fornicate with the world. And it's all through Scripture. Love not the world. If the love of the world's in you, the love of the Father's not in you. He said, be not part of the world. Don't be consumed with them. Don't give in to them. Why did he tell them? Kill the other people. Kill all of them. Because he knew that his bride would fornicate with the world and be tainted. So Jesus said, except for fornication. This is where we get into a spiritual principle about yourself, that the world is not all the bride. Now you understand, it's like Brother Billy said this morning in the church, you're not a part of the bride until you get saved. Once you cry out to Jesus, the Bible says now, you've been washed white as snow. You know what else is white? That bride's dress most of the time. You've been cleaned white. You now put on, there's one verse that talks about when they come into the marriage supper, unless you're wearing that bride, unless you're wearing that garment, you don't get a place in there. Listen, when you get saved, you become a part of the bride. But the world is not the bride. So what Jesus was getting at here is that there's a group of people that are unfaithful, there's a group of people that are faithful. The bride, the world. He's only coming for the bride. And so he tells these people that he's speaking to about the Pharisees that except for fornication, there's not a reason, immorality. And again, understand what I'm saying. Porneia, when we get into this, it can encompass abuse, and it can encompass adultery, sexual relations of many different kinds. So See what I'm saying? Your relationship might absolutely be covered. But let's say it's not, just for a moment. You've been divorced in this place, and it's for the wrong reason. If it was before you got saved, guess what? It's covered by the blood. If you were in a marriage and you left because you went after somebody else, guess what? You're saved now, that sin was covered by the blood. Now I want to tell you this, if your wife or your husband left you and went after somebody else, and now they're remarried, you're remarried, guess what? It's covered by the blood. It ain't no different than any other sin. It's covered. And to say that now, hear me. Divorce is not an unforgivable sin. So many people get so bent out of shape about this, and they miss the point. I understand your situation is different from mine. Whatever the reason you ended up where you are now, that's not what I'm talking about. But divorce is not an unforgivable sin. You can have forgiveness, you can move forward, but Jesus wanted it to be clear, and you have to understand why I'm preaching this. Because in no way, shape, or form are you supposed to just divorce and leave your wife. Times got tough, I need to leave her. Now times got tough with this one, I need to leave her. Now I'm interested in somebody else, I need to leave her. This is sacred. This covenant that you're making with somebody is bigger than you. And God doesn't leave like we want to leave. His heart ain't deceitfully wicked like ours. Understand what I'm telling you this morning. This is a sacred covenant that reflects an even bigger covenant. Marriage reflects Christ, his marriage with the church. The government will pass away. Your taxes will pass away. The name, Burnett, that I'm going to give her will pass away. But you know what won't pass away? Jesus and his marriage to the supper. We'll be at the marriage supper. Amen. Hear what I'm telling you this morning and going into this. Now, the Bible says in the case of immorality after marriage, the Old Testament law prescribed the dissolving of the marriage and execution, the putting to death of both offenders. So, this is what happened with the law. The law said that if after marriage she is unfaithful and you find her unfaithful, you kill her. And not just do you kill her, but you kill the man that she's unfaithful with. That was the strictness that we're talking about. When it came to the law, the blood covenants, the sacrificing of animals, it was very extreme. And so when it came to divorce, when it came to somebody being unfaithful, it wasn't just they cheated, it was that now they died. And now this completely lines up with the rest of the Old Testament. As God's people were unfaithful to him, suddenly the armies would invade and they would kill thousands. Suddenly these things would happen that would kill many people. They were unfaithful to God and they suffered the consequences of being unfaithful to God. Now, people would say that's unfair, that's not right, but you got to get the bigger principle of what God was showing. If you are unfaithful to God in life, one day you're going to spend eternity in hell. So God had to show that this is what happens when you are unfaithful. You suffer a punishment that you don't want to suffer. Now, of course, when we get to the New Testament, that's not what they do. That's the first stone. It was a new way, this grace that we see. That's not what I want to preach about this morning. What I am telling you is this: in Deuteronomy. But now, hear what I'm saying. When Jesus, bigger principle, things are changing. Stay with me for a minute in this. What's happening is metaphorical. You see, Jesus has a relationship with the church. But through marriage and through the punishment from when you live a life without God, and you spend eternity in hell. In the Old Testament, if you joined to your wife, and then you cheated on your wife, and you were stoned to death. There were consequences. Now, we continue on, and again, I told you what Paul had to say when it came to it, but you need to know that God, he hates divorce. The Bible talks about Malachi 2:16. I'm not going to read it, but it does say he hates divorce. Why? This is why. Because he hadn't left you. Now, this ought to be something that makes you happy right here, because people will leave. And maybe you've been guilty of leaving. Maybe you've been left yourself. People will leave. And sometimes it's absolutely for the wrong reasons. Maybe you cheated. Maybe they cheated. Maybe they just didn't like looking at you anymore. Maybe they got tired. But people will leave. But see, the beautiful thing is this: God's not like that. He's not finicky like we are. It doesn't matter. The sin, the trouble, the transgressions, the errors, the mistakes, God is still there. And so divorce is something that he doesn't do. And now unfaithfulness
is something he faces all the time. But he still puts up with us. And this is where I want to draw your attention to the book of Hosea. If you've never read it, the book of Hosea. Now, I'm not going to read it, but I would encourage you to, especially in the beginning of it. But this was the point of Hosea. The Bible said the Lord told Hosea to marry a harlot. And the harlot's name was Gomer. And this is what happened. The Lord told him, marry this harlot. And he said, do it because Israel's become a harlot. So what happens is he marries Gomer, and you know what she does? It'll blow your mind. You would never guess it. She cheats on him constantly. She's his wife, but she leaves him. He took her out of the gutter. He loved her. He was there for her. But she leaves him. She just continues to cheat and to do wrong. But this is what happens. There comes a moment where he pays for her. You see, she's cheated. She's fornicated. She's done all these things. She's committed adultery. And can you imagine as a man now, I believe every woman here can get what it's like to have been unfaithful. But I cannot imagine as a man the anger that just swells up in me at the thought of coming in on somebody that you're joined with, your wife, your partner, and she cheated on you. Not once, but more than once. How could you just be there for her? But not just that. Hosea paid for her. See, he bought her. He said, I'll give you what I have for her. And this happened to reflect what happened with Jesus. You see, what's happened is we were the harlots. We were the unfaithful spouse. You see, in the beginning, in the garden, we were joined to God. Adam and Eve were with God. They were created to be in union with God. But they sinned, and they ate of that fruit. And now, because of that, through the blood, you now are the cheater. You now are the spouse that is cheating. And Jesus walks in on you. And how many times has he walked in on you lying and stealing or saying wrong, speaking wrong, cussing, murdering, doing these sinful things that we don't want to do? How many times have we been deep in the bed of sin and God walked in and saw us? But the beauty of the gospel is this, that he saw us in that sin. He walked in. Jesus, as the groom, opened up his door. And there we were, laying in the bed with sin. You know what Jesus did? I'll tell you what I want to do. That's the one moment where I think that must be why people murder right there. But now you hear what I'm telling you. That's not what Jesus did. Hosea paid for. Jesus paid for us. Old Testament law says that for fornication, it is death. You see, we fornicated with the world. We were in the garden, and since then, now we've taken on that sin nature. And so when the world sees us, we are the adulterers. That woman that was brought out, that was us. Thrown down at their feet. That's why Jesus said, if any of you is without sin, you cast the first stone. And every one of them had to realize, no, it's me too. It's me too. Jesus did something that I can never imagine doing. He saw us when we were in the bed of adultery. And he said, I'll pay that price. Put me to death so that they can live. And the father said, wait, you didn't cheat though. They did, not you. Jesus said, me. Put the punishment on me. And he did that because he loved you. Now, this is why divorce is such a big deal. Because God had the chance to divorce you. You see, God could have said, stone every one of them. Let hailstones fall from earth and stone to death every one of them adulterers. Every one of them. But he didn't do that. He said, kill me. Jesus had the right to divorce you. And he said, no. I'll pay the price. And so now as a church, when we throw around divorce and when we say this is right, Jesus says, no! If ever there was a reason to be right to divorce, Jesus had it. But instead of doing it, he said, I'll take the punishment. I'll take the pain. Put it on me. Let me pay the price. Now again, as we're reading through this, we see, what did Jesus say? He knew he was going to go to the cross. He said, except for fornication. Why? Because it is a biblical principle. When you are joined together and she cheats on you, then she's doing just like the world does. She's unfaithful. He's unfaithful. Biblically, you are allowed to leave. And this can be all kinds of cheating. But hear me, as Christians, as people that know Jesus and know His grace, that should never be our desire. It should never be something we want to happen. And I understand, again, please hear what I'm trying to get at. The purpose of this message is not to shame anybody that's walked through divorce. It's not to shame anybody that's been, but it's to get you to understand that marriage is a reflective covenant. That ring that you wear on your finger, it's a reflective covenant. When the world sees it, they're supposed to see Jesus. And so this is something that would happen in my lifetime. My dad, he's not here, and I love him, but he was terrible when I was growing up. And God's brought him a long way. But I can't tell you how many times, man, he kicked in doors or threw things across the house or, cussed mom out. I remember at an early age learning what cuss words was. Because my dad would be yelling at my mom and stuff. And now they went through pain and trouble, and mom wouldn't leave. And we went through some things that she should have been able to leave. You know what I told her as a preacher? You should leave. He's done wrong. You should leave. You know what she said? Just can't do it. And that might not be your story, and that's okay. I can't tell you that would be my story. To have the right to do it and say no. She wouldn't do it. In that moment, that covenant reflected to me, this is how Jesus is. He's joined to the bride. He won't leave. He's here for him. There's just a few more scriptures here. We see in Matthew 18 and 21, and I'm drawing to a close. The Bible says that then came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times 7? Till 7 times? And Jesus said unto him, I say not unto thee 7 times, but unto 70 times 7. Now, again, we've read this verse a million times, but in understanding marriage, it makes something different. You see, because Jesus had a reason to not forgive you and me. He was rightfully given a reason that he could have not forgiven us, but he did. Not only did he forgive us, he does. It's a constant. We're constantly making mistakes. That's why Paul said, I want to do right, I do wrong. I don't want to be involved in sin, but every time I turn around, I'm back in that bed of sin. I keep doing wrong. But we find grace working, that God is still forgiving. And so here, Peter is talking to the man who is forgiven on such a great level. And he says, how often should I forgive my brother? 7 times? If they hit 8, let them go? And Jesus says, no. 7 times. And again, we know that's not math. That's not what he was getting at. Nobody added that up and was like, that's a lot. But I got a few that they're going to cross that today. That's not what he did. He was making a point. And it's in marriage. And anybody's been married longer than a day or two, you know this. You're going to have to show that grace. You're going to have to forgive when you don't want to forgive. And you know why? We reflect the forgiveness that we have. Sometimes your wife does not deserve it. Oh man, I'm telling you, sometimes your husband, he doesn't deserve it at all. I use one, but don't you amen it, because I'm sure your husband could amen one about you. Man, I can tell you some times when Elizabeth jumped all over Matt. And I've had to back away because I said, if she was mine, that'd be a different conversation we could have. And a lot of it's just because we're so much alike. But I tell you, I'm like, I'm not, no, sir, absolutely not. And it was funny, I was telling somebody at work about this. We were talking about it. They were saying how I'm very, what do they call it? Not handsome. That's not what I'm looking for. They said, you're just so slow. They didn't say slow to speak, but gentle, something like that.
Genteel.
Yeah, and something like, I said, well, you
patient man in your life. And they got to going on, well, tell me, there got to be one time he lost it. I had to tell him about it. I got one time. I do have one time. I know you want to know, so I'm going to tell you. We were coming back from bowling, and we were supposed to be waiting on somebody, Mama or somebody, and Matt had pulled out in the car, you know, as husbands do. We just think we know what we're doing. We just drive, and we'll get there. And of course, the people we waiting on hadn't left yet. And Elizabeth just tore into him. What do you think you're doing? They're waiting. Blah, and it went on and on and on. And that man stomped that brake, about threw us all out the car. And everybody, I did just like that. I mean, I went full back and forth. I thought I broke the seat. When I finally got two, I was a little dizzy. When I finally got two, he was just looking at it. She didn't say nothing. I don't remember what he said, but man, it was profound. That was the end of it, though. The end of that
She
argument.
didn't say nothing else.
She did. And you've probably been on the receiving end of that once or twice in your life, too. Say all this to be funny, but what I'm getting at here is, in what I'm saying, there's times like that, you better believe he didn't want to forgive her. You better believe you didn't want to forgive him. She didn't want to forgive, you better believe this happens. But we do it because we look back to Jesus, who caught us in adultery and who said, I forgive him. I forgive her. And so now that's how we live, to reflect that. Our life is a reflection. But you better believe that if you choose to be married, your marriage is a reflection. See, because your life is a reflection of that new life in Christ. Your marriage is a reflection of that covenant that Jesus has with his bride. I'm going to tell you this. I know a lot of jealous men over their bride. You ain't never met a jealous man like Jesus over his bride. He won't let nobody mess with it. You see the world out there and how they're treating the Christians. The reason I know we don't wait long is because God doesn't let his bride be destroyed. God won't let his church be beat down. God won't let, you know what he said? There's so many scriptures you read in the Old Testament where he says, you sinned, you did wrong, yet I will wait. Yet I'll stay. Yet he just keeps saying it. I won't leave you. There's but still grace, hope, and mercy. He's the most patient, long-suffering bride, or bridegroom is what the Bible says, husband that there could ever be. This is where we get into Ephesians 5 and 25 in closing. The Bible says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. That's what your marriage ought to reflect right there. And of course, you know what it says to the wives, submit unto your husbands. But this is the principle that I want to talk about right here. Love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. It makes me sick when people throw up that, you ought to submit unto me. Because, yeah, submission from your wife it should happen. It is important. But did you hear the mandate that God gave to the husbands? We're to love as Christ loves the church. There's no greater love in the world. There's no greater forgiveness created ever. There is no greater patience than this. That Christ would love us sinful people. That Jesus would love us. And would give himself for us. And he says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. In closing this morning, marriage is a covenant reflective relationship. It's an agreement between two people. Then what we're saying in these vows, now listen to what they say. You ever done that? You know, you get them software agreements and they're about a mile long, you gotta scroll down. We don't read half that stuff. It might be like, you give me your house, we give it to you. We don't know, we just scroll down and sign it. You know, we download that new download on our iPhone or a tablet, and it'd be like, just agree to this user agreement. Boom. I mean, it might be like your car, your house, your children are all mine. Take them all. We don't know. We just agreed to it. Every time I sign a bank, I made a bank account. They give me a booklet, and they'll be like, if you just want to read through this, and then they sit there. I'm not about to read through a book while you're watching me, so I'm just like, yeah, okay, sign. And you know what happened? I didn't realize every month you're going to take $7 out of my account just because I have a bank account. I didn't see that, but they can bring you back to it. You didn't look right there. You didn't see that. Here's what I'm getting at here. I listen to what that covenant you agree to is. It's not just words. I was serious. I preached that wedding. It would be better for you to run back out that door than to stand before God and agree to something that you don't have any intention of keeping. You know the words that you said, till death do us part, sickness and health. And again, hear me. There is grace. If you have been through a failed marriage, you've been through 2, you've been through 3, you've been through 4, you've been through 8. If that's you, guess what? Even though society might look down on you, listen, that sin ain't no bigger than my sin, than her sin, than his sin, and it is forgivable. But it's like anything else. You know when you smoke, now we talk about sins and things, you know, I used to smoke. This is what I did after that. I said, if I get lung cancer, I will not be mad at God. You know why? Because I chain smoked cigarettes from when I was like 13 years old. Just a pack of Newports a day, sometimes a pack and a half. So if I suffer the consequences, I'm not going to be mad. See what I'm saying? Same thing when it comes to stealing. If I go rob a bank and I get shot in the leg or they put me in jail, I'm not going to be mad at God that happened when I ask him to forgive me. He'll forgive me. There are people in jail that are forgiven of their sins, but they're still serving out prison sentence. Why? Because of the consequences of